Hey everyone, welcome to episode 10 of Open Books with Alana and Erin, two female leaders modernizing the accounting space. Episode 10.
We made
But
it.
it's so exciting. I think we say that with every episode,
I
though. We
was
made it.
Thinking the same
Are
thing.
we saying we made it through the week or like made it through the week to record?
Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah, made it to the next episode, episode 10.
Yes.
And so today we're going to talk about team member growth. So we talk a lot about, us as leaders and our growth as leaders. But a primary goal for this podcast was always to talk about leaders supporting their teams and us supporting our teams. That's such a huge piece of servant leadership. So today we're going to dive into that team member growth.
Yeah.
So to start, how do you know when a team member is ready for leadership?
So, in my experience, there are a couple different indicators, and also sometimes the team member will just flat out say it.
Yep.
It's really nice when they do that. It kind of makes it easy.
Crystal clear.
Yeah. But I think first and foremost, like, is there actually any interest there? Like, have they mentioned anything in passing? It's kind of, if you're active listening, you'll pick up on the verbiage they use, just the phrases that they're using when they talk about, working with other team members. And I think you can kind of get a feel for who wants to move into that leadership role and then who doesn't. Usually it becomes more obvious in like a one-on-one scenario, like our one-on-ones that I do with my team or in evaluations. It's funny. I actually had one team member come out and flatly say that like leadership was not what they wanted.
Yeah.
It was someone who's been in the industry for a while and was like, I did that. It's not in my skill set. I don't enjoy it. I would much rather focus on this technical thing and have that kind of be my specialty. And it was really nice to have a person say flat out that they weren't interested and recognized that it wasn't what made them happy. So I think we can pick up on it a lot, just not from how the individuals talk, and then sometimes just flat out asking the question, like, hey, is leadership where you want to go? Yep. How about with your team?
Yeah, I think very similar. I think it's nice when a team member is like, yes, I want leadership, or no, I've tried it, I don't want leadership. I think what leads to that answer for them is having the prior experience, right? Yeah. So they've tried it, they don't want to do it. They've tried it, they want to try it again. Yeah. Where I think it can be hard to identify with team members is when you have team members who may not have had leadership experience previously. But I find you can really start to identify when they're ready through like day-to-day situations and interactions that come up. You kind of start to see it bubble to the top of like, you're starting to handle things, the way a leader would look at things. So much of it is like in their dynamic with other team members, how they handle critical conversations with clients, how they're like starting to strategically think through something as opposed to just the here and now, because that's such a big part of leadership is being able to see long term. So I think when they start doing that, but then also when they proactively start doing that, when you're not having to push for, okay, here's how I would yes, still coaching them through, but like they're bringing things to you or bringing up things of how they would handle something. When they're being more proactive about that, I think you can start to see like, I think you're ready for that next step of leadership. Yeah. Is really where that comes in.
And then you can start having that like, hey, is leadership something you've thought about? Is this where you see yourself going?
Yep.
And then asking more questions on top of that.
I agree. And I think that's a really important part too, because so often we just look at, is the team member ready for leadership? I think it's important to have the conversation with them about here's how things might change for you. Your dynamic with some team members might change. Your dynamic with the clients might change. Do you love production? You might get pulled out of production to a certain extent. So I think while, yes, identifying when they're ready, but also just being very honest about here's how things might change.
Mm-hmm.
And as a leader, you can kind of adapt and make things, kind of make your day like filled with what you want.
Right.
But to a certain extent, like you have to make room for the leadership duties.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny. We are experiencing that right now at the firm where we've got some promotions going on. And that was a huge conversation piece of your day to day is going to change.
Yeah.
Yes, you'll still have some production stuff. You'll still have some relationships with clients, but you're going to be on more meetings, which can be really hard for some people.
Yep.
And they don't necessarily think about that part of leadership. They think like, oh, I'm going to have people reporting to me and I might make more.
Yep.
But what does that actually look like in the day to day? And it's so important to have those conversations.
Yeah. When I had a conversation recently with someone at our firm, and they had brought up, just in looking at some movement in the future, they had brought up, why do you want this? Why do you want to, have this next duty? And they were like, you need to identify that so that, because leadership, there's some hard things that come with it in any firm. Like that's just the nature of being a leader. It's not always black and white, cut and dry, which we love as accountants.
Yes.
It's not always that. In any industry, it's not. And so I think what that taught me also is helping new leaders identify why do they want it, what's really driving them, because that you have to fall back on that when you have a tough day or like, things are tough in the moment.
Yes.
You really have to lean back on, why am I a leader? Why am I doing this? And you've got to be able to pull from it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really interesting question.
Very much so.
Yeah, to use with new leaders as well.
Yeah, and I know we have this question a little further down,
Yeah.
but we're going to bump it up to
Sure.
right now.
Yeah.
So many people see leadership as the only way forward.
Yep.
And as accountants, I think we're a good example of when that isn't necessarily the best fit.
Yeah.
I don't think accountants in general, like you mentioned, they like the black and white.
Yep.
Leadership is so much gray.
Yeah.
And that can be really difficult. And just moving someone up because of their tenure at the firm or how much business they bring in isn't necessarily the right move for them.
Yeah.
So how do you let the team know that leadership isn't the only way to grow in the firm?
Yeah. I mean, first, just to feed off your comment, like I wish that would, I think it's prevalent in so many industries, especially public accounting, that up or out type of mentality. And I think, times are changing. So where hopefully we'll see more of that just not even be a factor. I really want to see it go away, to be honest, because I think, to be honest, it drives away some of the best people. So it's really important for me, for the teams that I lead, that they understand it is not up or out. Especially in public accounting, there is so much room for growth. It doesn't have to be just leading a team. I think we've touched on this on prior episodes. Like you can lead, next to you. You can lead with clients. You can lead with technology.
Yeah.
Like there's so many areas to grow in. And I think we just have to be we have to communicate that to our team so that they don't feel like, oh, I don't want to be a leader. I need to go look for something else. Like really showing them that there is that path. Because also to put somebody in leadership that really doesn't want to be there, for me, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes a firm can make, probably any business can make, is putting someone who doesn't want to be there, because it not only hurts them, and they probably were really great technically, and we've just now put them in a role they don't want to be in. But then also it has such a huge rippling impact to the team that they're leading, because you can tell they don't want to be there. And it's very disheartening to work for someone who doesn't want to be leading you. It's so tough.
It's so extremely hard to feel any passion for what you are doing, or even any care when you know that you're leader does not care.
Yeah.
Like, it just drags everything down.
It
And
does.
anything that we can do to avoid that, avoid putting someone in that position, because they have to be miserable too. Like,
Right.
it's bad, bad, bad.
For everyone. Yeah.
Just not good.
Yep.
And I do think the industry is changing, and hopefully business in general is changing.
Yep.
What we've started doing as part of our quarterly evaluation that we do and send out is we ask people to rank like where their interest is.
Oh.
Leadership is one of them, but also like onboarding is one if they want to like focus on that. Production is one if they just want to work on more complex clients and that's what they really enjoy. We have like 7 or 8 different things, and we ask them to pick 2 to 3 of where their interest lies, so they don't have to just pick leadership because they might think that's the right one.
Right.
They can also pick something else that hopefully is what they're also very interested in.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of have more conversations to see like, okay, this is what leadership means. Yep. Is it something that you want to do? Are you interested in it? Or do you have the perception that it is the only way forward or the only way to make the quote unquote big bucks?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's so much of it too, is like not only making sure that there are paths that are something other than just leadership, but also that there's reward on those paths so that, they're not having to choose between doing something they really love and benefiting from it.
It's that part of it. I am a huge advocate for, like, I would call it like an equity pay or equal pay of, like, if you go the production route and leadership isn't for you, like, just because you've chosen this route, that shouldn't mean that your earning power is capped at a certain amount. I feel like from CEO down, like, there should be some equality there.
Yeah.
Whether it's looking at, I mean, accountants, we always want to look at the numbers.
Yes, we do.
But that's one way to do it. But I see all these news stories about these CEOs and all these leaders, VPs, making these millions and millions of dollars beyond what the actual production people work or earn. And of course, any worker is going to see that and think like, oh, leadership is the only way I'm going to be able to make more money.
Yeah.
And we hope that we've created enough of a culture that money isn't the only thing that matters.
Sure. Yep.
But I mean,
still
in
matters.
The economic space we are right now, like, it matters.
We're not volunteering.
Exactly.
Right?
Like, it matters a lot.
Yep.
So I think recognizing that and being like pretty transparent and equal in how people are being compensated removes a little bit of that fear from the team member that like, oh, I'm limiting myself by choosing this other thing that I like a lot.
Yeah.
But there's no quote unquote future there.
Yeah. And I think also alternatively, especially in accounting, because we are so numbers driven, you can actually see it from the other side as well as like, okay, well, with production, I'm actually producing numbers that you can take and put in an equation, right? And yes, there's still, some gray area to how you come up with that, but the numbers, create the equation. And I think sometimes even with leadership, it's like, well, how am I getting compensated then if my production starts to waver, right?
Yeah.
Like how does that fit into the equation, right?
Yeah.
And so I think what I'm hearing through this is I think it's just with anything important to be transparent with employees. And, you take this route, this is how compensation is, the equation for compensation and then the route through leadership. So I think in any case, just being transparent about that.
Yeah. I mean, they're still going to see what's happening at all of the other companies out there in the world and still see that in many, many cases,
yes,
leadership are the high earners. But I think as we move forward, I think that's
Mhm.
starting to change.
Yep,
I guess
agree.
we aren't there yet. It's going to take many, many years.
Yeah.
And the destruction of capitalism, but
That's a different podcast.
it very much so is. Sorry, getting a little radical.
Anyways, so
but they are still going to see that and still be influenced. by that.
totally, yeah. So, so we've identified team members, right, who feels like they're ready for leadership. How do you then support that journey with them?
So I like to start off pretty low stakes.
Sure.
Low stakes, low risk, gives them a chance to feel it out. I love having them do some training with new staff, see how they kind of build a relationship with that team member. It gives them a space to kind of talk with authority to a new person.
Yep.
And that way they don't have the prior relationship with another coworker, like a colleague that they might have. Like there might be some not animosity, but just history there.
Yep.
And with a new team member, it's a fresh relationship and they can kind of handle it themselves. So I like to let them take that opportunity, see how they handle it, talk through them, like, what are your end goals? What are you trying to accomplish with this? But it's low stakes. So if it doesn't go exactly as planned, that's okay. But they learned from it. So that's personally kind of how I like to do it. It's hard if you aren't in the hiring space and you don't have a new person coming on.
Yes.
So in that case, we might do like, hey, we're planning a firm retreat. Can each one of you 3 people that are, have that leadership interest, like maybe have each of them run a session.
Okay.
So that they have a little bit of that, okay, I have to speak from a place of authority on this.
Yeah.
They get plenty of time to prep, but because they're facing everyone and not just a singular person, it kind of, again, takes away a little bit of that anxiety about any prior relationships.
Yeah.
That one's a bit more high stakes, I would say. Like maybe someone a little further along in their leadership journey, but that's kind of how I like to do it. How about you?
It's pretty similar, I would say, in starting to give them the lead on certain projects. We're always doing new projects. And so it's like, okay, this person can take the lead on that. But for me, what it really comes down to is really starting to empower that individual. So I think it kind of changes from telling them how to do something or, asking the questions for them to get there, but having them start to lead, what things look like. Because I think, like you said, that starts with some low stake things for them to start to stretch the muscle, learn. They also kind of see what it means to be a leader, and not everyone's always going to agree with you.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Like, here's the first, decision you're going to have to make. Not everyone's going to be happy.
Yep.
And then we'll talk about that because it's just going to continue to grow.
Right.
All of those, different dynamics you have to juggle. So I think the low stakes times that they can start to experience that dynamic will just help them in the long run. So like I said, for me, just empowering them to go through those situations, have my support, but kind of leading those situations is important.
I also find like preempting those opportunities for them, like, we will talk about this afterwards, kind of what you picked up on it. I'll share what I noticed so that they know ahead of time that it's not just they're going to do this one thing and it's done. It's like there's true follow-up, because I think a lot of times we drop the follow-up. We set someone up for something and then it's all good. Everything's great. And then we never do the actual like, okay, what did we learn from this today?
Because we're like, it's done. Move it on.
Next project. So that follow-up and after action review, I guess, is the more technical term. But making sure that they know ahead of time that that will happen, and then actually scheduling time to do it. I think gives them shows them that we are like truly invested in building this skill in them,
Yeah.
or enhancing what they have. Yeah.
And I think too, like similar to the follow-up afterwards, beforehand, like talking through with them, you're never going to be 100% ready. And I've been there. I am still never 100% ready, with like each new situation that comes
Yes.
up. But sharing with them that you're probably nervous, little anxiety,
Mhm.
you're not feeling like you have maybe all the answers. That's okay. You don't need to have all the answers.
Mhm.
Either I'll be in the room with you, or it's okay to say you don't know.
Yeah.
So I think not only, like you said, that follow up, but having that conversation beforehand just to kind of let them know, like,
Mhm.
it's okay to have a dead air for a little bit
Yeah.
or to have a I don't know answer. I need to get back to you, just so that they feel prepared if and when that situation arises as well.
When
Yeah.
it will, 'cause
Oh
it
my gosh.
will.
Yeah. And if you're not prepared for it, it hits you like a freight train.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I just failed. I didn't know this answer.
Mm.
Everything else might have gone so well, but like I didn't know this one answer. And you can't know everything as
Yeah.
a leader.
And
Or,
that can
like-
just eat away at them.
Yes.
And
Yep.
because it has
Oh.
eaten away at me.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, it's helping grow those muscles, those leadership muscles. It's really easy to start them off, I find, with
Mhm.
teaching technical skills.
Yeah.
It gives them that something that they know are pretty comfortable in
Mhm.
technically.
Yep.
Usually there is a right or a wrong answer. So
Right.
there's less gray area.
Yep.
Starting them off with that and then kind of moving into the, okay, you came to me with this more leadership question.
Yep.
What would your first instinct be? And then talking through that. It
And
really helps.
Totally. And I think to that point, you and I are so heavily based in servant leadership, but it's also in supporting that team member, they have to find their own leadership voice. And it can't be our voice. I think in the beginning, it takes kind of you model what you see.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, they have to start deciding how they're going to lead. They
Yeah.
have to just start deciding what their priorities are as a
Mhm.
leader. And so I think as you continue on that journey of supporting them, there does come a time, where it kind of switches and they're ready to stand on their own. They
Yeah.
have their own voice. And I think we as leaders have to trust their voice and
Yep.
that they're ready. We've done everything we can and like they can now make those decisions
Yeah.
however, they see fit
Yep.
in the best interest of the firm and the team.
That is
Which is
so
tough.
hard. Oh,
It is.
so hard to
Mhm.
just let them go
Yep.
and make the decision, even though like I probably would have done that a little
Yeah.
differently, or I would have approached it differently. But
Yep.
like they have to stand on their own 2 feet
Mhm.
at some point. And
Yep.
who's not to say that their way isn't the better way?
Totally.
Just because it's different from how
Yep.
I would have handled it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Mhm.
Because there is like leadership, servant leadership specifically. I don't think there is there is a definite wrong way managing from
Right.
fear.
Right.
But that leaves
Mhm.
a huge wide open
Yes.
scope of ways that you can manage
Yeah.
and lead your team. And just because it's not what I would do doesn't mean it isn't
Right.
also effective and work well for those people.
Right. And I think in those moments, we have to lean back on servant leadership and like, oh, maybe they're not as emotionally attached to this.
Yes.
And that's driving my emotion of the decision. But
Mhm.
like, oh, that does make sense if you
Yes.
step aside and let them, make that
Yeah.
decision. So
I hope, because I know that will happen at some point.
sure. Yeah.
And I hope that I have the like wherewithal or the recognition
Yeah.
to take a step back and use that as a learning experience and
Mhm.
communicate that to them.
Sure.
Because I feel like we should also be sharing like when we are learning from our team members.
Yeah.
So if I learn like someone handles something one way, I'm like, you know what? Like I actually picked up a lot from that. I
Yeah.
want to share that so that they know that it's okay to still be learning as
Sure.
a leader.
Yeah. I like that.
I hope I recognize that
Yeah.
when it happens. Because
Yeah.
inevitably it will.
Oh, it will. Yeah. Yep.
So that actually is kind of learning from our team
Yeah,
a little bit.
it is.
What have you learned from your team in this whole
Yeah.
team growth
Team growth.
leadership?
What I've really learned is, and I kind of touched on this in the beginning, is you're not always going to see somebody who's ready for leadership in like one situation and it's like, great, ready for leadership, let's go. But I think if you're really in tune with your team, like I said, you can start to see it in the day-to-day events that happen, and like you said, really active listening and in those conversations you have with them. And for me, it's just a very like gradual uptick of like, man, you're really growing, you're really learning, but also you want leadership, and it feels like it just kind of naturally leads in that direction if you're listening to what your team really wants.
Yeah.
Because I think that can get confused with, you have a need for a leader and you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And like we talked about, that's so detrimental.
Yeah.
So I've just learned like really being in tune with your team and with what they want is so important in the long run, and you'll see it through the actions and conversations that you have. What about you?
Mine is actually just bouncing off of what
Yeah.
you said about the conversations that people are having. We were going through some, like I said, some promotion stuff, and I was talking to the team member who was going to be taking on their own team, and they said, they used the phrase of, I wrote it down because I didn't want to mess it up. She was most worried in accepting the role of making sure that her team felt valued. And that she wasn't worried about the technical stuff. I mean, even though she was, but like her biggest worry was wanting to make sure they felt valued and were successful. And that to me was like, okay, she's ready for this next step, because she's focused on not her own importance as a leader, but how she can help the team. And it was very much this eye-opening, like, oh my God, I messaged Chris and Sarah, our CFO and COO, and I was like, this is like just filled my heart. Because that's what I would hope that our leaders want, is that they really want the success of our team. It made me feel really good about the choices that we had made up to that point. And I guess I learned of what I like to see in a team member moving into that role. It was so, like I said, just heartwarming.
And I think what's cool about that too is like, she's feeding off the culture and she's feeding off of how she's been led, right? And so she's like, what it feels like to me is, you know, that's a big focus for you guys. And so she wants to make sure she does justice as she fills that role, which is really incredible.
Yeah, it was very, like I said, I had to message Chris and Sarah after and just like, I'm so like proud. And like, I feel like this is the right, best decision for everyone.
Reinforced it. Totally.
Exactly.
Very cool.
But yeah, it was very, very, very heartwarming.
Yeah.
On the opposite side, what would you tell yourself in the past?
Back when like starting leadership journey and everything. And mine's coming from like a team member perspective, because when you start out, you are not starting out as a leader, right? So you're filling that team member role. And I would tell myself, just to be more of an advocate for my own career. We are all advocates for our own career. And in many industries, many businesses, especially public accounting, there are very traditional paths that are set forward. But you might be growing faster than that path allows. And so, 2 years in, you become a senior, 3 years in, and like, you hit these numerical milestones, but you might be itching for growth faster. And I think that's where we see a lot of people ditch accounting, and not, in a negative way, but things just aren't happening fast enough for them. And so I think for me, just have wanted to have been more of an advocate for my career of like, hey, I feel ready for this. And and start pushing for those things.
Yeah.
Whether it's, through conversations or just starting to do more outside of just that traditional path.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. What about you?
So I have always been a bit of a take charge person.
Yep.
Whether it was leadership or just getting something done.
Sure.
My parents like to joke that one of my first jobs was working at a movie theater.
Yeah.
There was a broom closet that was disgusting and no one would clean it.
You cleaned
I'm like,
it.
I am going to clean this because it's disgusting. And I know how to clean. Like, my parents taught me how to clean.
Yeah.
But, like, that's always been my
Mhm.
take charge. So when I entered the firm, the accounting space, and specifically in the accounting department at a public accounting firm, I had that take charge attitude.
Yeah.
Even though I was still like very green, first accounting job.
Yeah.
But still like did my taking charge. I don't think anyone appreciated it. I got them somewhat paperless.
Yeah.
So like props.
Yep.
But I wish I knew what kind of resources there were out there for leadership in general, but also like servant leadership or like the Crucial Conversations book. I wish I had read that or even knew that there was literature out there like that.
Yep.
Back, 12 years ago now. Because I think about a lot about those relationships and how I handled that, and from my take charginess, like it was somewhat confrontational and more like, just do this because it's better no matter what anyone else said. Like, this is the right way.
Yeah.
When it may not have totally been the right way.
Yeah.
I mean, paperless is still the right way, but
less paper cuts.
Yeah, exactly. But I would go back and hand myself a list of books and articles, publications to read that talked about actual effective leadership and why moving into leadership matters.
Yeah.
And leading from the right space.
Yep.
So yeah.
Well, and I think that's something we can do for our teams now, right? Is giving them, because we don't know everything.
Oh,
we're still reading a ton of books. We're always sharing the new stuff we're reading. But then doing that with our team members too, of like, these are some good books, and sharing that so that they can, so that they have, what maybe we wanted back then.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening to Open Books. We hope that by bringing forward the lessons that we've learned along the way during our time in the accounting industry, others can learn from us and share in our journey to evolve as leaders in the accounting community. Thanks everyone.